Oh, hello and welcome to Phosphorus Live. This is our bi-weekly look at the very interesting world of xIoT, the extended Internet of Things. I'm your host, Mike Huckaby, the head of global go-to-market enablement here at Phosphorus, and I'm joined, as always, by our device-obsessed director of sales engineering, James McCarthy. Hi, James.
Howdy.
And we're happy to have you join us. We get together like this every 2 weeks to provide education on the connected devices that we all use to run our businesses on these days, and to give some insight into what Phosphorus does to help keep those devices secure. Format's real simple. We have a quick discussion on a specific topic, and then a Phosphorus technical take related to that topic. Quick hit, less than 30 minutes, and we'll allow some time for Q&A. And today, we have a really special guest and a really fun topic. But before we get to that, hey, James, what's been happening at the xIoT news desk lately?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things that I think are interesting. One is I think we already kind of know this and we see this because we do, like you said, have a pretty unique view of the world through the lens of IoT. But reports are starting to come out again that confirm the actual rise of IoT vulnerabilities and the fact that over the past year alone, they're up 136%, which is significant. What we're seeing is a trend where as these kind of endpoint detection tools and as these other cybersecurity vendors are getting better at their jobs, they're pushing the attackers a little bit further out and out and out on the edge. So we're starting to see more vulnerabilities discovered. We're starting to get see more of them being leveraged as part of an attack, and we're actually seeing that even just a year and a half ago, the overall vulnerability landscape, IoT only accounted for 17%. And that's up now over 34% of the entire vulnerability landscape. So we're seeing just a doubling over the last couple of years. But what we're really seeing is that IoT vulnerabilities are now kind of getting close to that halfway point of all vulnerabilities in the world. So definitely it's a trend that I think, again, we see and we deal with every day, but we're starting to see the market and enterprise IT kind of pick up on that a little bit as well. But another thing that I thought was interesting that I, in doing some research recently, was there was a botnet that was discovered by some researchers that had actually infected 1.3 million Android-based set-top boxes across the world. Most of these were in Central America and some in Europe. But what happened was it actually uncovered what I think is a really kind of scary trend in the IoT space, in that the botnet itself we see fairly often these days, right? These IoT devices are getting compromised and becoming part of a larger botnet to be used for multiple nefarious things. But what this attack actually uncovered was that some of the more budget-friendly IoT manufacturers were starting to, in an effort to save money, actually ship their devices with firmware and operating systems that are significantly older than what they report themselves to be in a UI. And that's actually a really, really dangerous trend, because what happens is now as a user, it's hard enough to find people who are kind of security focused and hygiene focused alone. But now if you get somebody who's like, hey, I'm going to do the right thing, I'm going to update and get to the latest version, I want to get rid of these vulnerabilities, what happens is they're going to log in now and think that they're on that latest version, even though the underlying operating system and OS is not, right? So now they've got this, what I would say is even a bigger risk, in that they think they're secure, and in reality is that they're not. So something that I thought was really interesting. It's a trend that I think we're going to keep looking at, trying to keep an eye on, because right now that's relegated to more of the budget-friendly consumer-based IoT products. But if that starts to kind of creep its way into the enterprise world, we've got a real problem.
Wow. And yeah, for consumers, most consumers probably wouldn't even know and wouldn't even have a way to be able to figure out if that version's been giving you the false version.
Yeah, and that's where the advantage of what we can do in the fact that we're actually talking directly to the device. We don't care about what a self-reported version says. We actually talk to the firmware and talk to the device itself, right? So it allows us to kind of see through some of that obfuscation from the manufacturer.
And you got to have something like this with the enormous amount of devices that are out there. And as you said, with the vulnerabilities ticking up on that side, we're going to have to pay more and more attention to these type of unique kind of use cases as well. Vendors, or manufacturers trying to do something a little bit funky that we're going to have to help them not do that. All right. Hey, thank you very much, James. Thank you for the update. All right. So as I mentioned, we have a special guest. Now, our topic today is the devices are the target, which we all know they are. And we have with us John Terrill, Phosphorus CISO and all-around xIoT expert. Now, John was on the show previously to give a little bit of his background, but today we asked him to talk about and demonstrate some real xIoT hacking. So, hey, John, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike, thanks for like having me back. James, the story that you were telling about the fake versions just had me thinking about a thing I saw today, which was there's a zoo in China, and I guess they have a panda like display, and they took dogs and painted them like they're pandas, and they just kind of went with it. So it just got me thinking about that. And I was like, that's
sure, don't worry. Of course they're pandas. Of course they are. We're the experts on pandas. We know.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. So John, hey, we often hear the question from our prospects and customers, hey, am I really vulnerable? Can bad actors really hack these things that I have hanging on my walls? And even though we can use Phosphorus platform to show and fix the vulnerabilities that are out there, we still don't always have practical examples of devices being compromised to kind of prove the point. So when someone comes around you and asks, hey, am I really vulnerable? What do you typically say to them?
Yes. Like most of these devices are in pretty rough shape, but I tend to not try to tell them that there's a problem. I actually prefer to show them. So if you'll allow me, I've got some demos here that I wanted to share with you guys.
Fantastic.
All right, let's see if I can do this and not crash my computer. All right, can you guys see this?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So today we're going to talk real xIoT hacking. Again, xIoT is this kind of catch-all term for everything that's not your traditional IT. So when I started thinking about this problem, I actually kind of ignored it. And I had gotten the question about what is our IoT security strategy? And I think the person who had asked me, wanted some sound bites for going onto a conference, kind of a thought leadery type of thing. And I was like, we're just going to ignore it. Like it's not a problem. They're dumb devices. They can be infected. Let's go focus on the network. Let's try to segment them off so that they can't infect the rest of the network. So we're trying to protect ourselves from them. We were not trying to protect the device itself. And I think a lot of that came from some historical significance of, at least the example that like I point to was a hack of the New York Times in 2014, 2015, where essentially some Chinese actors had come in and were trying to target some journalists that were involved with something to do with Tibet. I think they were dealing with like a human rights thing, and they decided that the route to get to them was to go via the journalists. So they eventually found them, and they thought that they got them out, but then they kept getting reinfected. They're like, where are these things coming from? And it turned out that they were hiding out on an IP-enabled thermostat. Now, that's not something that, that they realized that they had. Their facilities team had installed it. And that story kind of made its way through financial services and media and tech, where we were all just like, oh, the risk of IoT now is a point of persistence. It's this thing where they can hide out and reinfect the rest of the network. But when I got that question, what is our IoT security strategy? I was kind of flippant about it. And it took me a couple of weeks. And the hedge fund that I happened to work at the time, I was in a conversation and somebody mentioned the art collection. So the super billionaire like owner had this incredible art collection worth $1 billion plus dollars. And they mentioned something about the art being part of the collateral. I was like, oh, we like the banks actually count that as firm art, not his own personal stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, we can borrow and we get leverage on that. I'm like, oh, I need to start worrying about this. And that kind of got me thinking, oh, we got to start worrying about the cameras. And we started to find, oh, we've got, 6, 7-year-old firmware. We've got default passwords, and this is protecting hundreds of millions of dollars of art. It's like, all right, this now is becoming a thing. And that kind of got me going, oh, it's not just a dumb device to reinfect the network. This device has a characteristic to it that is special. What kind of crosses this cyber physical boundary? So that's what I wanted to talk about today, is show you kind of the special nature of this, because I could sit here and show you, I got a shell and I can reverse engineer these things and show off a bunch of exploits, and I have, but I want to show the very kind of special nature of these devices and how that kind of translates from traditional cyber into this physical world.
Fantastic.
So I've got a couple of demos, and hopefully they will all work. So the first one, the scenario here was that we wanted to go take over a phone. We think about, your IP-enabled phones, your conferencing systems. A lot of times we don't think phones are concerned, but what if you can remotely hotmic them? So you can think about the phone on the CEO's desk, or the conference room in the run-up to earnings where the board meets. That's the kind of stuff where, a shell doesn't help me, but being able to listen into the room does. So I ended up going after the phone system in our Nashville office, which happens to be a DECT base phone. You could Google for the default creds very, very easily. I was able to then find that phone, and I was able to log into it.
Find that phone on our network.
Yes, so
You
that's
a phone
that,
yeah. Okay,
and that's wired up for calls. And you see when you log in here, it says default password is in use. And when you can log into the phone, you can also go over here and turn on something called CSTA control. And there's an equivalent of this, but it's essentially being able to send remote commands to a phone. Cisco has something similar. Instead of it being direct commands to the phone, you send it to the central call manager. And based on the person that's logged in, you can start telling the phone to do things. So in this case, I wanted to find out more about what this neat functionality was. And here it's got a schema for it. And then it breaks out what the different values are. And it gives you a very helpful list of what some of these things are, like speakerphone and the ability to make a call and hit certain buttons on the phone. So I figured, let's give this a shot and see if this works. I should note that the number in there is my actual phone number, so please don't call me. But we ended up doing this, and we were able to get this to work where we could actually hotmic a phone within the office. So here's a short video of what that looks like.
I need to change my direct deposit info for payroll. Okay.
That's interesting.
Is someone there?
All right. So we actually did make those calls. We got that to work. We had some volunteers in the office help us out. But it's as simple as that. Right? Like, this is not an aggressive exploit. This is using a device in the way that it was intended. So this cyber physical divide starts giving you extra components that are more than just a regular computer. So I'm going to jump on to the next one, unless Mike or James, you've got some questions or comments.
Okay. No, I think it is pretty interesting, though. Default credential left on these. Pretty standard. Most time we're going to put a phone in like that and not change anything. And then how easy it is for you to just log into the system, manipulate the settings, and do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and for most people, they're not going to be able to notice that that's going on. Yeah. And if you did that at scale, like that could, that's a real problem.
Right.
How easy would that be to, instead of listening to an individual phone call, script that out and record those conversations at scale in an organization?
Oh, that's actually a lot easier than you would think. All of the SIP traffic, you can pull it in, you can put it into Wireshark, it decodes it, and you can listen to it. It's shockingly easy. Yeah. All right, so on to the next scenario. So this one, we thought we'd get a little bit more creative, and we were going to look at a couple of different devices and put them together. So the first one was this Access Entry Manager. This is a door controller, and the door controller essentially gives you a central management platform for electronic locks. So let's assume that we could find one of these. We quickly can Google and find the default password for it. And I don't know anything about a door controller. I've never installed these things. So I went and got the manual. And if you look into this, verify the hardware connections, you can see this thing under verification controls doors. There's a function called lock. I'm going to guess that has the ability to lock and unlock doors. Mm-hmm. So let's go give it a shot. So that's exactly what we did. We were able to log in with those default creds. And because we had the documentation, we could quickly navigate to the correct location, the hardware connection verification piece. And when you click into that, you see exactly this. You've got a section for where one lock was configured, the current state of it, and you've got really easy buttons to lock and unlock things. This is straightforward stuff. Now, you're probably thinking, all right, so you can get into a door control. It's on your internal network. That's probably not that big of a deal. But they're not just on your internal network, because here's a census scan, which is similar to Shodan. And the characteristics here are these door controllers. And these are on the public internet in some cases, which is just absolutely wild. But it's a real thing. So we decided to show this off. I want to show a couple of Access products kind of chained together. And we took what's called an OMG cable from Hack5 and one of our volunteers from the office to help us out. And we thought we would help get her to be more criminal-like. So we gave her an implant to bring in and plug into one of our management machines. And the idea here was we were going to take over and unlock the door for her. And then we're going to pause the feed of a video so that you break into a place you're not supposed to be. And now you also aren't being recorded. So let's take a look at what that is going to look like. Here we've got a camera that's pointed at the front door for the office. You can see we've got an employee that walks in. And we're going to go over and pause that feed. And here's our volunteer coming into the office. You can't see it. We unlock the door remotely. And she's going to walk over and plug that into, I believe it's our head of HR's computer. So you're probably thinking that's probably not that big of a deal, but what she just plugged in is not a normal USB-C cord. So what we ended up doing was getting something called an OMG cable. And inside the adapter on it, it's got a full wireless stack. And it looks like, it's identical to a regular kind of USB-C cable. And you can pass in this stuff called Ducky script, which essentially will treat that cable like a wireless device that is now controlled remotely by you, but you can pass in keyboard commands to it. So I was able to pass this stuff in, and on the right here, the PowerShell is what was sent from that cable into the computer, and on the left here was a computer that it actually called back to. So it wasn't that I went in and hacked into the computer with some sort of an exploit. It's that with default credentials, I was able to take over those physical devices and then plug in this thing. So I didn't have to worry about CrowdStrike. I didn't have to worry about, can I crack passwords? Can I do all sorts of complicated things? Mm-hmm. this was just a simpler way of being able to get in. So, you know, this cable was $200. The original capability was developed by the NSA, and I think the project was called Copperhead. And I think at the time, now this is 10, 15 years ago, they were like $20,000 a pop. Now they're $200 and you can get them in a day or two.
Oh.
But that didn't require that I had advanced exploitation techniques. It was a lot of default passwords that got me in to treat the device the exact way it was intended to be treated.
Yeah.
So let's talk about printers. We've got lots of printers in all sorts of companies, lots of different versions. Printers have a lot of functionality in them. So HP default printer passwords, great. That's all pretty standard. Go log into an HP printer here. And the stuff I'm showing is not specific to HP, but you can log in, and I started to look for different functionality that might be interesting. And there's some stuff in here where like you can turn on PJL, which is a print job language. It's a lot of extra features. It's turned off. It's kind of cheating to turn it on and be like, oh, it was, you know, it was on by a default. But I thought, you know what, let's go focus on some things that the printers can't turn off. Things like PostScript. So like a PDF file, PostScript is the kind of underlying structure of it. So when we send a PostScript file, the printer has to know how to read this stuff. So it can talk PostScript and PJL and sometimes PCL. So we're going to use something called the Printer Exploitation Toolkit. This was part of a master's thesis that someone had put out, and just really, really neat. It made it very easy to translate some basic commands into these PostScript and PJL like languages. So it's got a ton of interesting things you could do. This is the PJL side, but this is the PostScript side. And I've highlighted this here for capture, because it turns out that you can actually tell the printer to start capturing future jobs. And it's going to store them, and you've got the ability to pull them down later. So within this capture command, you've got the ability to start capturing, stop, and you can also go in and fetch everything that's been captured. So let's give that a shot. So I'm going to connect into this printer, and it's giving me available commands. So I'm going to capture. It's telling me that I've got to add some extra features. So I told it to capture start. And now we're going to have somebody end up going over here and printing. So another of our volunteers printing off wire instructions, confidential documents. So we went in here and then ran capture fetch, and it pulled those files down for us. And I was able to see that they're now a bunch of PostScript files. And I take the PostScript files and convert them into PDF. And voila, we've got the documents that we're getting printed. And it didn't require that I even had the default password. That's just how printers work. So there's functionality like this where you need to be able to interrogate that printer and understand, is it in a state where it's trying to capture these things?
Now, is this something, PostScript is not, this isn't some specific model or one brand or one model.
No, this is everything.
Across the board. All printers have.
I mean, but this is what printers are intended to do. Like, we're not exploiting a flaw, we're exploiting a feature.
Yeah.
Right? These devices can be the target, and anybody's feature can be a vulnerability if it's used in, creative ways. All right. So I got one more, and then I'll toss it back to you guys. So this one has to do with a universal power supply. So here we've got a Schneider Electric, like UPS, come in here with the default passwords. You can see, this is a power supply. like why I can log into it, I don't really know. I can't imagine a time that I've remember ever changing a password on UPS, because it's just not a thing. Like, sure, you don't want to drive down to the data center, so maybe that's hooked up to the network. I can look at, the power that's going through. This is not that interesting until you realize that you can turn off the things connected to the UPS. So I'm going to go in here and make our lab manager a little bit more upset, and we're going to turn off the power outlets. And all of a sudden, these things are off. And it's that simple. And it was default passwords to manage a device exactly to do what it was intended. So it's really that simple. And when we went in and I did this, it happened to turn off the power, because that's what it's intended to do. So there's a lot of devices out there that you wouldn't want to turn off. Cameras, medical devices, data centers, manufacturing equipment. I can think of so many different types of devices, like a water treatment and filtration, your HVAC system. If you turn off the HVAC for a building, you got to send the people home. So again, these devices are the target. They're being used in kind of new and creative ways. And if you can kind of chain them together, you can do some things that you really didn't expect. And a lot of times they've got default passwords, they've got old firmware, they've got a lot of things that can allow you to manipulate those devices. And it really crosses what we kind of call the cyber physical boundary. And when I started thinking about these, I really don't like thinking about it as kind of a vulnerability or a CV or any one point problem. It's when you put it together, it's the outcome. It's not the fact that I took over a UPS. It's the fact that I turned off life critical systems. It's not the fact that I got into your HVAC system. It's that I disabled it and sent everybody home. It's not that I got into the water treatment center and turned off a PLC. It's that treatment system is not running and it's poisoning thousands of people.
Right.
So, these devices are very special. And I think we've got to start thinking about them for what they do and what their purpose is, because they're not just dumb computers. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, man. That's such great information. It's so, this breeds a lot of awareness, and just having that one takeaway that says, I'm not exploiting a vulnerability. It's a feature. It's working like it's supposed to. I'm just doing something nefarious with that device, using the existing features to be able to get to my outcome. So we've bred some, we've given some awareness to that right now. And then and I'll tee you up to James as well, which is, okay, well, how do you start to address internally, knowing that they may have features that may not be able to be turned off, but in some way or another, I still need to keep those things secure. So what would you guys say that like our audience needs to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, the first step is understand where that exists in your environment, right? Know what those devices are, know where they are, know what they do, and then understand the impact that they have to the business and your operations, right? So understanding that connection between, and John, you highlighted this really well. Instead of thinking of it as a air conditioning system or an HVAC that's just simply providing air conditioning, think of it as this is business critical, because if it turns off, everyone goes home and production stops, right? That's the real impact of something that seemingly wouldn't be that impactful. And so your risk associated with that is goes up exponentially when you start to see it through the right lens. And so I think finding and understanding where those devices are is the first step in understanding the risk. And then obviously using something to go in there and actually evaluate the state of those devices. The biggest thing, the easiest thing, where are the default credentials? Because you don't need a vulnerability. You don't need these complex chains of a MITRE attacks. You don't need any of that if the thing is running admin and pass as the login, right? So it's great place to start is that visibility piece.
Anything you'd add to that, John?
No, I mean, it's kind of it feels like the mid '90s for like how vulnerable these things are. The exploits and getting shells and all that, like it's fun if you kind of geek out on that stuff, and like I love doing it. I thought it was interesting that one of the recent reports that came out on some botnets were talking about the type of vulnerabilities that people were using to get in. And a lot of it was not like complex buffer overflows and other memory corruption.
Mm-hmm.
It was command injection, stuff that like is kind of it works every time because it doesn't like maintain state. Or it's things like default passwords. And then you can just upload some, some bad firmware. Hacking got harder for certain types of devices. These are not those devices.
So true, so true. These devices can cause massive business disruption if we're not paying attention to them. So the criticality of it, we need to have more and more of an understanding of it, and the ability to change the way that we've traditionally operated so that we have continuous understanding of the state of the devices is a key thing. And that's why I think we love being in the space at Phosphorus, because we know we have a way for organizations to change the way that they've been able to manage these in the past in a way to keep them more secure today. So fantastic. Thank you so much for the conversation today, John.
Yeah, sure.
That just popped up in the chat.
Yeah.
I think it's worth addressing. So a great question on, it sounds like Phosphorus is IoT focused. How applicable is the solution to an OT environment? And I think it's a really good question. We look at things through the lens of what we call xIoT. And so for us, if it's IP connected and you can't put, a CrowdStrike agent or something similar onto it, then it's something that we're going to be concerned with, right? It's an area of focus for us. And so a lot of our customer base is very strong in the OT space. And what's unique about that is the criticality of these devices in an OT environment are actually much higher. In the risk is understood, I think, in a more unique way than kind of your traditional IoT. But for us, it's an area that we are absolutely focused on. It's something that we are really good at helping solve problems in the OT space. And we don't treat them differently in that we don't see it as well. We focus almost more on the OT space because that criticality and risk is so high. So we do work really well with all the different vendors in that space, and our platform is built for that. So great question, Derek. Thank you.
Hey, James, to kind of follow that up, when I think about the vulnerability of like OT, I think folks have kind of thought OT was off the table because a lot of times it's not traditional IP, right? It's not getting the updates the same way. It's going over the air. It's talking Zigbee. It's doing like Modbus and all sorts of other things. But you've got to keep in mind that that's got to make its way back into the IT side at some point. So those gateways are absolutely what I would start targeting. Because while I could do some like software-defined radio stuff to go after, the RF side, the gateways are on the network, and you can start talking to those things and start to interact with the rest of that OT world.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a thing, and they've got all the same problems that the IT stuff does.
Yeah.
All right. We're a little bit past time, but this has been a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming back on, John. We'll look forward to our next discussion, having you on Phosphorus Live as well. And for anybody out there that want to have further discussion on what Phosphorus does and the way Phosphorus can help, please reach out. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in 2 weeks.